How are you? Good to see you. Good morning. Sorry for the tech glitch. Good to see you. Admit all. And I'm gonna put this over here and I'm gonna close this and I'm going to chat this guy here. Well, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining.
Good morning.
Let's get this
Morning.
started. We did a couple of Dennis classes this past weeks on weekend because of his availability. Um, that's over the next few weeks we're going to kind of like get the cadence back. I'm gonna start with the simple Q&A this week, short and sweet, I guess, and then next week we're gonna do a little bit of composing. So let's go for some questions. Got any questions? Any comments? Anything that you wanted to start the chat with?
Nothing yet.
Haha.
I have to say I'm joining from my work today
I see. Where you,
because the time it just falls at the time I'm at the office.
where are you located?
Aidsland, South Carolina today.
South Carolina.
Mhm.
Eh, I've been
Officially North. I'm in North Carolina. My
Uh-huh.
studio is North Carolina.
I see. Um, my wife and I were considering moving. We live in LA, and it's great. We love it. Well, actually, we live in a place called.
North Carolina is really nice right now.
Uh-huh. Well, how's the weather
It's
like over there?
beautiful today. Kinda. Well, it's a little bit windy, but it's pretty good. It will
Is it
get better later today. It's gonna be warmer today. Like
is it
70, I think, today, something like that, or 65.
what's the we're considering New Jersey, or Texas, or Florida,
Texas is nice.
and the reason is we've got friends over there.
I can enthusiastically recommend Florida and Texas.
You do recommend Florida and
Yeah.
Texas or not? Okay. Thumbs up to Florida and Texas, or thumbs down. What did you say?
Oh, I said that I can enthusiastically recommend it.
Oh, what about?
Yeah. Florida has a lot of studios.
Yeah, there's a lot of studios in Florida, and I believe the music industry is growing in around Dallas and Austin as well.
Yeah, that's true.
Dallas in particular is a city that that I would love to move to. Um, how's the weather over there compared to? I mean, we we are used to like the thing about California is that it's just so the weather's so nice to a point where you forget that there are seasons. And I'm not saying this is a good way, um, but it's always kind of like nice. And I guess the weather in Florida is it's more humid. Um, Texas has that, but
Well,
not as much.
yeah, Florida's going to be more humid than Texas, but Texas wasn't too humid. Um, I mean, you get used to it eventually.
Uh
And
huh.
I will say is that uh, California and Florida both have more seasons than Texas does. If you look at it, Texas really just has like 3 months of winter and then like 2 weeks of spring, a whole bunch of summer, 2 weeks of fall, and then winter again.
Where
So,
do you
and the
live?
summer can get pretty hot too.
Okay. Where do you live?
Well, right now I am in Tennessee, but I just moved here from Texas.
Uh huh. Nice. Why did you move?
Work for my parents.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense.
Hello, Mark.
Hello,
Yes.
Hello.
Fabio.
Uh, Maybe I will begin. I have a question. It's my question is not about the Denison curves, but about few videos you made. Uh, And my question is much more about how to EQ reverbs. Yeah, I saw you do it a lot of times, but I still don't know if I do it right or not. Maybe you can once again explain how to do
Yeah,
it rightly.
absolutely. So I take a very simple approach, because mm, my mixing, and I'll show in a second, but my mixing is not chirurgical in my template. When I'm composing fast, my template does the mixing for me, and then when I'm done composing, I go in the mix side of the music and I do some tweaks. But it's generic. Let's put it this way. It's not like I'm done composing, I export the tracks, and now let's go mixing. So if we go here and we go to the reverbs section, which is this section here, from here to here. Um, so here are my reverbs, got my Valhalla, some here cinematic rooms, etc. And I do have a little bit of pre and post EQ for my reverbs. But you will see that it is very generic and it's all the same for all the reverbs. So before each reverb, I'll just roll off a little bit of the top end like this, and I'll cut some low frequencies starting at like 95, something like this. So that's what I do before each reverb. And what we have here is a short reverb, so a short gated reverb for like percussive instruments. Another short reverb here. Then this is a mid reverb, kind of like seventh heaven. Then I've got another one, seventh heaven, specific for piano. Another seventh heaven with kind of like the scoring stage, kind of like longer reverb. Then I've got the cinematic rooms here, which is like kind of the main orchestral. It's kind of like a longer reverb with the dark cathedral preset and a kind of like a 2.3 second. That's for like the main orchestra. And I'm just showing the different reverbs so you see that in general it's relatively, it has to be I've got enough reverbs that I can apply to different instruments depending on the nature. Sometimes we're gonna need shorter, faster reverbs. Sometimes we're gonna need longer reverbs. But generally, like for orchestral, sometimes we may need for slower orchestral stuff. Sometimes we will need a longer 3.2 second reverb. But many times we're gonna need a shorter, kind of like 2.5, 2.3 second reverb, depending on. But what I've got is something in between. And again, depending on the track, I'll go and I'll tweak some things, but it's pretty generic in the same thing. I've got some more reverbs here, but then the EQ stays consistent of all the reverbs. Before, there's this one that I just showed, and then after the reverb, got a dynamic EQ that's gonna cut if it gets busy. So for example, let's just play this cue and see where the reverb builds up. When I hit play, I hopefully it's not going to be too loud. Let me just control this. One sec. Let me go here. Here. Just one sec, you guys. There you go. Bring this over here. There you go. All right, cool. So, let's see. Okay, let's see. Okay, cool. So as you can see, there's a notch here at 100, 250, 609, 1918, 5042, and 10,000 cycles.
Oh,
And
Mark,
it's, yes,
the
turns.
music mode is not on. Musician mode is not, because I can hear it. It's like really mono.
Got
Your
Thank you.
audio.
Thank you, turns. Let's see, zoom, boom. guy. Number 1 here. Original sound for musicians. And then number 2. We go here, boom. And then we go here. More. Turn on original sound. Thank you. Yeah. Cool. Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate that. So there you go. And those are set up as dynamic EQ that are going to cut up to 3 dBs. And this is set in auto. When you set this in advance, then you can set the threshold, and you could side chain this. But in this case, I leave it at auto because, again, I'm not. It's it has to do many things on autopilot. This template. That's it. As simple as that. Does this help, Fabio?
Yes, thank you very much.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
When you sent the tracks to Dennis, what is your process, or what is your gain staging to look at for sending that to him? Are you trying to like your peak values, as far as what sort of way that he can do his process? I know he said that he wants things to be dry. So I'm assuming that you're taking all of your reverb tracks, you're not sending that to him, but you're probably keeping all of your processing on it. But what is your peak value coming into for what is your I guess your peak value that you're looking for to send to Dennis, so the way that he can get started?
So with peak value, you are you referring to loudness in this case?
Right. Like on each track, are you looking that's like maybe something like -6 or maybe -12, or so?
So okay, cool. Let's start here. My template level, or each one of my tracks level, is everything set up so when my template is doing the mix, the levels are right, because I've got dynamic processors in my stems or groups or whatever that are doing its job. But if the level would be too low or too loud, then they would be doing the right processing, right?
Okay.
So that I set up the levels so in my template, my automated, let's put it this way, mix works the way it's supposed to be. When sending music to Dennis, I'll explain exactly how I turn off the reverb, etc. in a second. But the levels remain the same way I have them. What for sure is not going to, like, my levels will never going to peak. My tracks are always minus a lot, minus 6, 12, 20. So, and then when they from the tracks they go to the groups, and from the groups they go to the stems, and from the stems to the stereo. Okay, so from tracks to groups, the tracks again at the right level, so the groups are doing the processing, and when there are dynamic like we've got compressors and limiters and things like this, or when I've got tape saturation and things like this, where the level has to be the right one for the right amount of saturation, etc. The levels are right here. When I'm exporting to Dennis, I'll show in a second, turn off the reverbs, and I send the tracks to him. Many times my tracks are very low in level, which is like speaking at -12 or -18 or -9, things like this, depending on the nature of the cue. But I don't really care, because he just needs a track that's balanced, and then he can raise everything if he wants. If he needs to.
Okay. I see. So for you though, like if you're mixing it and mastering it, is your heavy lifting coming? It sounds like your heavy lifting is coming from your stems part, like your I guess your outputs, like you say you have your string sections, your horn sections, and stuff like that. Is that what I'm understanding? Like your heavy lifting is coming from there?
Yes, up until now, yes, and still continues to be like my stems, or what we can call them stems or groups, but from my tracks, they go to this section of blue tracks here that at the beginning they started being less, like we had fewer. So I went from the tracks to the groups, and the groups used to be kind of like strings short high, strings short low, blah blah blah. and I had maybe like 15, 20. Now I've got more like 30, 40. And here's where, yes, the heavy lifting of the mixing happens. But more and more, I'm transitioning to the the mixing happening in the actual tracks.
Oh, okay. I see.
For
Okay.
more, it's just more detail or more flexibility. I used to go from tracks to groups, and the groups would do the mix, and then from the groups to the fewer stems. Now we're talking just orchestra, synths, bass, perc, and the others kind of thing, five, and that's what did the mastering. So tracks just, just the source kind of thing. Groups do the mix, stems do the mastering, send to print, and that's it.
Okay. Thank you.
But I'm transitioning more and more to mixing it at the tracks now. And just to answer one more question, kind of like, and so when you send the music to Dennis, what happens? Well, because still I'm transitioning to do the mix in my kind of like my tracks, but because still the mix happens in the groups, all the reverbs are here. So when I'm exporting to him, I'm not exporting groups, I'm exporting tracks. So I would go here and I'm like, okay, he needs all these tracks, whatever, right? All these tracks, blah, 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 whatever I need to select. These tracks have no reverb because the reverb is set up here at the groups level. So because I'm not sending groups, I'm sending tracks, the reverb is not printed.
Okay. I understand. Okay. So a lot of your treatment is on individuals. Okay.
Exactly.
Got you.
If
Got
I
you.
needed to send groups with no reverb, just I would select them and I would bypass the sends section, and that's it.
Thank you.
It's it's very interesting. It's very interesting these days because obviously when you have budget and time, you're gonna have a mixing engineer that's going to do a better job than you. But depending on how evolved your template is, how good your template is at mixing your music, there's a lot of work that you have put in your template, and a lot of small tweaks and little details and improvements, and there's a lot. There's a lot going on behind the scenes when you've got a fully developed template. So when you send the non-treated tracks, non-mixed tracks to your mixing engineer, there's a lot that you lost in the mix. And so you're taking two steps back that the mixing engineer has to kind of like, okay, get it at the same place and hopefully improve it by a 10%. That is a lot of investment of time. Plus, when you're composing, there's that psychological, you're in the flow, you're in the mood, you know exactly what you're doing and the reasons why you are doing, because you're actually composing the track. And so the mixing, it's coherent to the outcome that you're trying to achieve. So you may take decisions mixing wise that make sense based on the composition. So you have that person has to load your track and within 2, 3, 4 hours kind of like get it at your level and surpass it, because mixing engineers for a 1, 2 minute track, generally it's gonna put 3, 4 hours. So I just see it's tough, and I've sent music to mixing engineers that then I compare to mine, and it's like it's not. Sometimes it's not better, and sometimes it's not that much better. It is less efficient, especially if your template that's a good, like, let me just show you. I'm working on a movie, and I have the honor and the privilege to be doing this movie with Dirk Gerert. And let me see if I've got it. Trello. Give me just 1 sec. Login. How do I do this? Give me just 1 sec. Give me just 1 sec here. Let me show you a couple of keys. Oh, that's perfect. just 1 sec. I'm back here. Login. There you go. Okay. Boards. Advice. Okay. We're here. Okay, this is we're not gonna discuss the type of movie, what the movie needs, etc. We're not gonna discuss the style or anything, or the stylistic choices and the director's direction. Just gonna take a listen to a cue.
Enables to have more transparency, more predictability.
There you go. And this is from Dirk. So from Dirk you can expect great sound. I'm just gonna play it back. This is the opening. Let's just play the audio for a second. Well, here. So this was, I just I listened to this and I'm like, it's freaking like this is you can like the music or not, whatever, right? But the production level of this, like, this is freaking awesome, right? And this, the director doesn't like it, wants us to take it down a notch, etc. That's a different thing. But you need to be able for project like this. We're starting a couple of days ago. We've got till the 18th, so it's a couple of weeks. 60 minutes of music. In this particular movie, it's a little bit less, so 50 minutes of music. So we're good, but we gotta move fast. This is pretty good. If he had to send, okay, let me just dry everything. Let me send to a mixing engineer to remix this. It takes time to get to a mix to this level, in my opinion. So, as if you've got a good template, it's gonna do most of this for you.
Okay,
Cool.
thank you.
Sorry for I went in the different direction to your question, but hopefully this was useful.
Oh no. It answered what I needed to know. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Good question. More questions. Thanks for joining. Those of you who just joined, sorry, took me just a second to let you in. All right.
I guess I'll go again. I have another one if nobody else wants to. So then to continue on with the mixing questions, what is your, like, for TV, television, because you said you do a lot of like lifetime things. What is your target LUFS? Let's say you're the one mastering it, mixing it. What is your target LUFS value for TV and stuff like that?
Let me see. I don't really care much because I'm sending to that mixing engineer, and so they do the final mix of not not of my music, but the music with the sound effects. And so generally, I will, to me, for this kind of projects, is as simple as I'll have the brick wall limiter there, and I'll have it compressing 1 to 3 dBs. That's it. So for example, if this was, it is not, but if this was this cue here, at the moment I have to bring it down a lot because I have this guy that is lowering the mix. Same problem again. Give me just 1 sec. There you go. There you go. So, going to now turn it off, bring this up. So that's what I would send. And the master would be kind of like 6.9 dBs higher in volume than the sum of my stems, because I brought it up just a little bit here. And when I put all of these, I take a note of this, and then when I import all the tracks or I export all the tracks from Cubase, or when I print the tracks from Cubase to Pro Tools, then I just bring up or I lower the level of the master. At the end of the day, we just want that, what we want is for them to be able to switch from stems to master without hearing any difference. And then for them, or for Andres, who's the dub mixing engineer in this movie, he'll adjust the music based on the level needed. So I don't really care. I just send I have a master that is, relatively loud, and that's it for these projects.
Okay, thank you.
So Mark, I have another question.
Yep.
Still about mixing and things like that.
Mhm.
My question is much more about parallel compression.
Mhm.
I never know when do I have to do it or not. I saw you are doing it a lot of time on your videos. And this is my question. When do you know that you have to apply parallel compression or not?
I like it on 2 scenarios primarily. When I want to thicken a sound a little bit, but it's not so I use it in percussive sounds 100%, like drums, like drum sets in general, but I also like it very much in toms. I like it in taikos. I like it in kind of like robust percussive sounds. I like it a lot. But I also use it for when I need to thicken a sound and doesn't need a lot of compression. So I like it for sometimes string ostinatos and things like this. It's like instruments that naturally wouldn't need parallel compression. I'll say that the parallel compression settings when compressing things like ostinato strings that generally don't get compressed are more subtle. So I'm talking like the ratios are lower and the thresholds and the knees are less aggressive than when I'm doing parallel compression to a percussive instrument. For example, if I'm parallel compressing a drum set, maybe I'll have a ratio of 8:1 with a hard knee, and then maybe the threshold is going to be relatively low compared to the input volume of the source or the compression plugin. Whereas if I was just compressing, regular compression, a drum set, I would be a little bit more subtle with the ratio and the threshold and the knee, etc. So I like for thickening, not just gaining presence, which is what naturally compression will do, but for thickening sound. And I use when I want to be a little bit more subtle with compression, with instruments that, or with kind of like melodic instruments that I just want to add a little bit of presence. But generally, I use parallel compression for percussive instruments when I want to add thickness. So yeah, I've got parallel compression in all my percussive stems, but that generally is just one layer of percussion. Sometimes, depending on the nature of the instrument, I may have a multiband compressor first, and then a parallel compression, and maybe just then another compressor. Sometimes a regular compressor, just different levels of compression for transparency. So we could get into more detail, but that's generally when I use parallel compression.
Okay, and just you are doing it during your mixing session or already during your composition?
Composing.
Composing.
It's all set up. For example,
Okay.
let's see. Let's play this track. Let's see. Low perk. So I've got a first pass of multiband compression, and then here I think I've got my parallel compressor here. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, just compressing a tad. Then in the second part gets a little bit louder, it compresses a little bit more. And then this hits the stem, and there's some more compression here. So there you go. And it's all set up. As I'm composing, all this mix happens behind the scenes. And then one thing that I like a lot with this kind of percussive elements is spiff. This guy here. I passed. So there you go. That's my processing for percussion.
Thank you.
I think the most important thing with percussion will definitely, I think with percussion, there are 3 elements to nail percussion. In order of importance, I would say balance. Like balance is key with percussion, because you want, like with a track like this, you want to, all the percussive elements to be right there in front to kind of to add that aggression, that energy to the track. So getting the levels right is super important. So balance first, and balance is very tricky again. And there's 2 balances: the balance of the overall percussive elements with the melodic elements, which is very tricky, but then the inner balance within the percussion group. But if you get that right, then you have a very solid starting point. So that's the first most important thing before compression, in my opinion. Second thing is going to be the positioning. Generally, percussion takes a lot of space in the mix. It doesn't need to take the entire spectrum like this. I'm talking width right now, left to right. It doesn't have to take the entire space, especially the lower percussive hits. So I like to close it a little bit, and percussion works so much better. It feels like you're channeling the power of that instrument, right? So I close the lower instruments. I close them a little bit, the higher instruments, the higher pitched instruments. Let me see. This is percussion low. See, if we go here, come on, there you go. If we go here, sorry, a lot of stuff opened. We can see how this guy is 70 plus minus 70, left 70 and right 70. So it's not quite wide. Close it a little bit, and that kind of like that first creates a space for other instruments to cut through the mix on the sides, strings, etc. And also kind of like channels the power towards more the center, which is for low instruments where we want it to be. So balance is king first. Second, the panning, positioning in the right place. For low instruments, I like to close it a little bit. And then for higher pitch instruments, those tiki-takas and those things like the rims, etc., I like to place them in the right place, left, right. So those are a little bit wider, but generally I place them, it's easier to locate them in the mix left, right. And number three is definitely compression. Number four would be reverb, but number three to me is compression. Compression is just helps, as we know, control levels a little bit, push the kind of like the presence a little bit of the percussion, and to add that aggression and that energy with percussion is that control is so much needed. So that's when we have the compression side of things. But again, if the levels are wrong, compression will help a little bit, but won't fix the problems. And then we've got reverb. That the reverb is going to that the reverb with percussion is tricky, because we are always told not, don't add too much reverb to percussion, and generally we're not going to add a lot of reverb. We want for it to be more present, cleaner, more in your face, depending on, but. And generally, we're going to use short reverbs, less amount of reverb, and sometimes we're going to use gated reverbs. But sometimes there are some sounds like the taikos toka Dennis added a ton of reverb. I think it was cinematic rooms. Kind of was like something like an epic hall preset or something like this. And if I remember correctly, it was like 2.3 or 2.5 seconds reverb with quite a lot of mix. So it was big. And that helped it sit so well in the mix. In that case, I think it worked. If we have to answer the question why, if we generally have less reverb, why so much reverb, I think it's a one-off element, da 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 doom, and then it stops. So it feels good, and it does not, muddy things. It doesn't make things muddy because it's not like da 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 da. It's going on all the entire time. It's just da 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 doom, tail, reverb tail, right? Da 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 doom, and so he made it kind of like okay, explosive with a long reverb tail that fit so well in the mix and made it so cinematic and added depth and the space and dynamic to the entire mix by adding so much reverb to the taikos. But the reverb is tricky. It can play a big role. It's important. I'm not saying that percussion should be super, present and clean and in your face all the time with dry and no reverb. I'm not saying that. It does have to have some reverb to, for it to feel coherent with the rest of the cinematic mix. But to me, I would say balance, then panning, compression, reverb.
And just one more thing about panning. I would like to know if you are using balance panning or panoramics panning.
Stereo. Yeah, panoramic. So stereo combined panner. Generally, Cubase starts with balance, which makes no sense. And then I go to stereo combined panner, so I can better adjust what needed. Yep.
Thank you.
Yep. Great question.
I do have a question.
Go ahead.
Okay, so as I'm working with music, and some of it, like I thinking about it and like, oh, I really need a synth, but I'm having a really hard time getting synths to work for me. Like I can work really well with orchestral instruments, but for whatever reason, I have a really hard time getting synths to work to get the to really get what I want. And I can't really, they just don't really work for me. But is there a way that I could either get around it, of where I could use something else instead, or that I'm simply just not looking in the right place for synths?
Okay, so fantastic. That's a great topic. Love it. I feel you. Like I still struggle with this, to be honest. And the reason is it's not my area of expertise. I'm more kind of like I feel more comfortable when it comes to orchestration with real instruments or with orchestral instruments. So here's the first thing that I will say. To me, and that's just me, what helps, and I've got a few questions for you, but to me, what helps make the synthetic hybrid uh, elements of the mix to work with the organic orchestral elements is there's gotta be something in common, and to me is I match the musical idea. So, like for example, and here's my question: when you say I've got problems with synths working with orchestral instruments, what is it in particular? What type of synth are you talking about? Are we talking pulses? Are we talking supporting pads? Are we talking leads? What is it that are you talking like synth bases? What is exactly what you're trying to achieve?
It's mostly the leads.
Leads. Okay, so what are you trying to achieve with those leads? For example, are you doubling the melody? Are you is it is it a melodic element? Is it something that adds texture and grit to what is it that you're trying to do?
Either adding texture or to be as the melodic instrument in general, for if I'm practicing on action, like mid-intensity action use.
Okay, cool. So great, awesome, fantastic. So what I try to do in those cases, like okay, I've got this. For example, let's say that we want to build. Let's build something. Let's use this as a base, as a foundation. Okay. Kind of thing with synth. Let's see. What we got here. Let me see. Let's see. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I want this to do. Cool. So basically, it's doing the. So I just thought of doing something that kind of like that's like a bend kind of thing. Let me just move this out of the way. And I did this with pitch shift, which is hidden down here. You're gonna laugh about this. There's this little guy here. Okay, I took my keyboard. I took it apart, so it's lying around. But it doesn't quite still fit the mix. Let's see. We can see this here. Okay, gonna move this here. Cool. Okay, it's still not fitting the mix. Let's see. And see if we've got another one. Okay, so now I'm gonna double with someone else. Let's see if I've got bend. Say this guy. So yeah, maybe. Same thing. I did the bend thing. I'm gonna add this guy here. Cool. Now, they still don't quite fit in the mix or blend. It kind of works, but, and by the way, what I'm using here, the one thing that will help is you're gonna be using your synth or whatever. I'm using Zebra in this case. I don't know, this preset is called Bender, and it's from this library here. And the other one is called, let's see, did I do this right? Got a few things going on, but another one, the other one is from the Unfinished, and is the Kronos library. So one thing that is going to help is using sounds, presets, or libraries that have a little bit more of a cinematic feel to it. There are synths that are going to sound more ADM. There are others going to sound a little bit more cinematic. I'm not good at programming synths. I can tweak them, but I like to start with a preset of, someone that develops kind of like more cinematic sounding synths, and there are many. So this is, but this is just a starting point. At this point, I still don't feel that kind of like fits the mix. I would add a little bit of reverb, but here's what I wanted to get: have another orchestral element doing the same thing that the synth is doing, to kind of like bring it together in the orchestral texture, or the orchestral build that you're doing. So for example, you've got that, maybe I can, let's see, tremolo, no, or solo, yeah. Okay, we got one. Maybe we can do cello so long, this guy. Yeah. So I think this concertino. Let's do this concertino. Yeah. Let's go. Go. Too loud. And now we've got these 1, 2, 3, and 4 elements that kind of go together. Still needs work. I did this very quickly, but now it has it's a synthetic that it has that crit, but it feels a little bit more part of the mix because I blend it with some orchestral elements. But I chose, so this is a big orchestral cue kind of thing. The orchestral elements or the acoustic elements that I chose are solo, tremolo elements that are part of the orchestral acoustic realm, but not part of the typical orchestra. And because if we had a solo tremolo cello and a solo tremolo violin, they wouldn't sound. They wouldn't be able to compete with a full orchestra like this. But this is a mock-up. It's actually mid intensity. We're not trying for this to sound realistic. We're just trying to create something cinematic in this case. And we're adding some acoustic elements to kind of like bring the hybrid synth elements closer to the mix. So just repeat the same thing that you're doing with synth with some acoustic instrument. That will help to bring it closer, or to blend it with the other orchestral elements. That is the thing that I think is the most effective. Obviously, range reverb, and so many other things are going to make it fit with the mix. But this is going to be the biggest. Does this make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Good.
And then I do have one more question of I noticed that sometimes in some of your compositions you use the same instrument quite a few times, and so my question is that like I'm working on a piece right now, and I already have cello on two parts, doing two lines for the Divisi that the cello part could do, but I've been playing cello for 6 years, and this is where I learned music. And so, every time I'm writing music, I am always thinking like, "Oh, is this playable? I want it to be playable with an orchestra." But should that be something that I worry about, or should it be or should I just, as long as if it's what the music needs, then just add it, or should I replicate it into another instrument, like from cello, I can put it into a trombone?
Such a great question. That's a great question, Kyle. So it depends on what it's the outcome, right? Why are you composing this piece? So if you're trying to replicate or simulate or emulate the realistic orchestral sound, then we would do things that the orchestra could actually do. If we are creating an orchestral mock-up and this is never going to be recorded with an orchestra, and we have no intention for it to sound realistic, then it's just complete freedom. And to me, I had this realization at some point that I always was treating libraries and in a way to kind of like mimic the orchestra. And then I think I was in a session at Warner Bros. And that was years ago. It is just a different animal. It's just a completely different thing. And so here's what what I think. We have been given this tool, which are sample libraries, and this is an amazing tool. They allow us to recreate the orchestral sound and kind of like get close to the orchestral sound, and that is just it's such a blessing. It's so much fun to be able to compose orchestral sound in the box, but it is not an orchestra. So with this, we can mimic the orchestral sound, or we can go beyond the orchestral sound. There are things that samples will do better than the orchestra. So the aggression, the staccatos, the precision, right? And there are things that the orchestra will do way better than samples. The emotional component, the slower melodies, the realistic. There are things that the orchestra will do much better than samples. And so again, if we're trying to recreate and mimic the sound, then yes, follow the rules. And there are even going to be times where to actually try to replicate the orchestral sound, we're gonna do things with samples that don't quite translate if you were going to orchestrate it on paper for an orchestra to perform this, because ultimately it is what we wanted to say that sonically it mimics what an orchestra would do if that is the outcome. But if your outcome is something else, like I'm creating a cinematic piece of music that sounds orchestral but that has nothing to do with an orchestra, then you can do whatever you want. So many times you're gonna see me like option D duplicating a track many times, and I'll have 8 violins staccatos tracks, and and sometimes I don't care, because my goal for that particular track and that style or whatever, it is not to replicate the orchestral sound or the realistic orchestral sound. So my answer would be, it depends on what's the outcome, what you want. But I wouldn't worry if it doesn't sound like an orchestra, if the outcome is not for your music to sound like a real orchestra. If it is, then it's a lot of work. But then it's a different set of rules. It is another
Okay.
instrument. Sample libraries is an instrument. You master the art of using sample libraries, and every sample library, it's a different instrument that you master. Yes, we can recreate the realistic orchestral sound, but it's just a different instrument. And that is fantastic. That is awesome. But that's an option that we have. But it's just one option. But I treat it as a different instrument. And sometimes I get close to realistic orchestral sound. Sometimes I layer a real orchestra on top. Sometimes I actually record an orchestra and I use samples to reinforce the orchestra. Sometimes it's completely mock-up and I'm trying to recreate the orchestral sound. Sometimes it's completely mock-up and I stay as far as I can from the orchestral sound because we're going in another direction. And that's fine.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
No, it doesn't matter what I'm doing. It's just always a nagging thing in the back of my head. Oh, you have to be realistic. You have to stick with what can be played in case in case it ever would be played. But then I could also just rearrange it so that way it could be played, which is also doable as well. That just means I'd have to omit a couple of parts so that way an orchestra could play it. Because if I'm using, say, a violin 4 times, well, technically, if I use the first violin 4 times, I could do a divisi across the first and second violins, but then that's omitting the entire second violin part, and they'd probably be doing something that's supporting the first violin part.
If you're dividing the violins 4 times in a sequencer and in the DAW, what you're doing is like you've got 4 times the size of that section. If you're doing DBC, you're dividing by 4. So in a real orchestra, if you were dividing DBC, then it would sound 4 times as thin and small for the strings. Even if you were just dividing violins 1 and 2 and the violins 2 in 2 parts, it will still sound thinner than you duplicating 4 times the violins with a sample library because you are doubling and just thickening. So it's different. If you are using a DBC patch that can divide up until like 3 or 4 parts, then that would be closer to the orchestra realistic sound. I get you. We tend to think as the orchestra, like real orchestra, is truth, right? And so when we are doing things, we should do things like an orchestra could do. But once you break free from orchestra is truth, there's nothing that I love more than like real music and real musicians and a live performance. To me personally, I love it. That doesn't mean it's better. I just love it. There's something in it that I cannot recreate with samples when it comes to the emotional impact that it has on me personally. And I love it. And I prefer live musicians over samples. That's great and that's awesome.
Oh.
But that doesn't mean that I need to recreate that sound always. That doesn't mean that orchestra is truth. Orchestra is just an instrument that has been around for a longer time, way longer time than samples. But that doesn't mean that your client wants that. Sometimes they will, sometimes they won't. So.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. My pleasure.
But I will agree with you. If I can get an orchestra, a live orchestra, I'll pick that over samples any day.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it's beautiful. And I feel just as I was saying when I was opening, when I was at the first lines to your question, is that it's a blessing that these days we can use sample libraries to create something that resembles what an orchestra can do. It's a blessing. It's great. It's so much fun, and it opens so many opportunities. But it's just a different thing. It's another instrument. And it's fun to use. That's what we do. 99% of the time, we are dealing with this, not with an orchestra, for obvious reasons. Budget being the biggest one, but convenience, etc. But yes, once you have your template, once you've got your mockup, if it's like if you the next like if you will always know, like realistically, you will always know. Is this going to get recorded with an orchestra later on? Because to record with an orchestra, at least you're gonna be talking, depending on you across all the cinematic orchestras or recording orchestras from East Europe to LA and Australia, we're talking, from $5,000 to $100,000, right? To record like 1 day of recording with an orchestra, depending on the level of expertise of the studio, etc. So because it's expensive, like 5K is expensive, and 100K is ultra expensive. So you will always know if you are composing and you're gonna have if you're going to be replacing with an orchestra, or if you're going to be supporting with an orchestra, or if the orchestra is going to be the main element and your mockup is going to be supporting the orchestra. So with that in mind, you will be, then you'll be composing accordingly. Okay, I'm doing this because then this, I'm gonna send this to Nick later on because he's gonna be, doing all the orchestration, and I'm gonna. This is going to be recorded. This is going to all be replaced. So as I'm composing, I'm composing in a way so it's gonna be first easy to transfer from mockup to score first, and then when the orchestra records this, it actually enhances what I did. So in that case, and why would we record with an orchestra? Well, because in this particular project we've decided that we can record with an orchestra because this score is more emotional, it's slower, it's more melodic, etc. Whatever it is, where the orchestra shines, right? If it's action, maybe we're gonna have an orchestra for some elements, but many of the elements are going to be synthetic when it comes to all the ostinatos, staccatos, percussion, synths, pulses, etc. It's gonna remain synth, right? And if we do record the ostinatos with the orchestra, we're gonna record in a specific way so we keep it tight, and then we can blend the samples with the orchestra to enhance and to add aggression to those ostinatos. Great, awesome. So you will know ahead of time that you're going to be composing and basically composing accordingly. And it's just a matter of understanding what is the orchestra good at and what is the samples or DAWs good at, and just understanding, okay, so for example, this is going to be the speed with action mid intensity, where we've got all these ostinatos and all these pulses, and we've got all these melodic elements. Okay, we've got this budget, we've got just one day to record, we got 60 minutes of music. Okay, so for this cue in particular, I guess we can put like 10 minutes to record. We're just gonna record the melodic elements because all the ostinatos are going to be samples, and you plan accordingly, right? And so in that case, when you're composing, then yes, you are thinking about what is going to stay samples, what's going to stay, or what's going to become orchestra. And then as you're composing, you're going to be composing accordingly, thinking on, okay, cool, awesome. These melodic lines are going to be high strings. Okay, so I'm not going to double this too much here because basically I'm just going to have violins 1, 2, and violas doing this in double octaves. Okay, awesome. Let's keep it realistic in here. So when we transfer to score, it's easy to replicate this sound and enhance it with the orchestra. Blah, 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 right? We could be talking here. It's just understanding one world, the other world, what they are good at, and doing things the right way for each one of them so they shine.
If you want to make a good study of some multi-divisi strings, sometimes into as many as 6 parts, look at Glier's The Sirens. It's a fantastic piece of music, and he look at the textures he gets out of that.
Thank you, huge. That's great. The Ravels, the BCs, those the more French kind of orchestration, and the textures that Hugh is mentioning. Yeah, it's very unique, and for that more French orchestration with woodwinds, like the woodwind section stays as like a 2 and a 3 with the divided strings, makes the woodwind colors come up because the busy strings sound thinner, and the woodwinds kind of like generally like strings unison and woodwinds. The woodwinds are going to add color, but as you divide the strings, it gets thinner, and so the colors of the woodwinds cut through the mix a little bit better. So yeah, worth studying that type of orchestration. Hard to replicate with samples. Generally, if we want to replicate that with samples, we're gonna go for either a library that can do DBCs, like LA scoring strings and things like this, or we're gonna use kind of like a chamber strings library for the DBC part.
Okay. And for one final question, sorry. So my template then I have currently is set up as it would. So it's very easy. I could just copy and paste it to turn it into an orchestral score. I have it set up the same way it would be on a score. Is there no point in having it that way, or should I just keep it or should I rearrange it?
I love it. There are many composers that have it set that way, because then it allows you to transfer from mock-up to score. Also, there are many composers who see the music better that way. When I've seen templates this way, it's very automated and all the key switches and everything. if you like working that way, that is fantastic. That's great. That's perfect. It's a personal taste. As you see, mine is more like it's less organized than your template. Let's put it this way. It fits my composing style, where I generally start with it's gonna start with. I generally start either with kind of like when it's more pulsed and action like kind of thing. I start with kind of like the low ostinatos in the strings generally, and if it's and in other styles, I'm gonna start with kind of like either the background strings or the melodic high strings. That's where I generally start, right? But it depends, obviously. It completely depends on the cue. So if you see my template, the strings are more available in the upper part of my template, and I have more division. I've got when it comes to articulations for some libraries, right? And depending on the library, I have it set up in a way or another way. It's just my working style and what makes me feel comfortable working with this tool, which is this template for me works. But if your template for you and it's organized just like a score, that is perfect. There are many, many composers that work that way, and it makes so much sense, both for the composing process, but also for the transfer process later on if you're going to be recording with an orchestra. So do what helps you compose and produce the music that you want to produce. The tool and how you evolve and build your tool, that template, the sequencer, the libraries, everything, is what is going to define or shape your sound. That unique sound that many people talk about is the things that as a composers it feels easier for us to do. So the type, what chords, what type of melodies, what type of what. So plus your tool. So your composing style plus how you've got set up your tool is what defines your sound in a way. So there's no right or wrong. And just so you know, there are many composers that have a very compressed template that looks just like a score, and they can access all the articulation through key switches, and it's fantastic, it's great, and that doesn't mean it's less flexible than what I show here when I've got hundreds of tracks. It can work. Depends on your composing style.
Okay, thank you.
Awesome. Gotta go, you guys. I can go for one final question if there's any question. If not, I will see you next week. We good? Okay, fantastic. Fantastic questions, everyone. Appreciate you all. And as I always say, I don't take you being here for granted. I appreciate so much. Thanks for spending this time with me. I hope that you found value. If got any further questions, just email me, mark@cinematiccomposing.com, or post it in the group, or maybe in the next class. Catch you next week. Bye-bye.
Have a good day.
Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
See ya. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Mark. Have a good day.
You too, Ken.